Welcome to round two. And here we are at the top of the roller coaster. So this is going to be a video overview of some things to keep in mind for Photoshop as well as file setup for you guys as you approach this first assignment. The tips that I'm going to be giving you right now are going to be pretty useful for you to be able to apply to all of the assignments that we're going to be doing within this class. I have misplaced my Wacom pen, of course. All right, so what I'm planning on doing for this first project is I had some options for old sketches that I did, and I had gone through all of my old sketchbooks and took photos and made a really big Photoshop gallery or Facebook gallery of all these photos. Um, and so I had a lot to be able to pick from for this project. And I found that a lot of those old ideas were sort of half ideas. So I thought about doing this one. This was the first one that came to mind. This is more recent, but meh, it's more a painting and more of a study of this fountain instead of an illustration. And I wanted some kind of unique story to be able to tell. So then I found this character that I never really did anything with that still sort of spoke to me as an interesting shape and form. And then I have this tree that, gosh, who knows when I sketched this, but it is an awesome looking design for this tree. And I thought that this character right here in the with the long red hat on could work really well sitting up on top of this little crevice for this tree. And then there was this one as well, which is cool and cosmic looking, but yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel like doing this one. And so yeah, I'm going to combine this tree painting, put this character here, knitting a blanket in an electric forest is the plan. So my next stop here is research. I love research, and I hope you guys do as well. So even though you've already thought through these ideas one time before, it's still important for you guys to go out there and find reference images. One of the things that I'm not the best at in the entire world is using color. I have a really hard time coming up with color palettes directly out of my head. And it's always fascinated me. There's so many different uses of color that are out there in the world that I would have never thought to use, and this is one of them. For this image here, this is extremely saturated. And I want to give you guys some tips when it comes to choosing color within your illustrations. A lot of times you want to work within this safe area here. Um, this is kind of the golden square of color. When you start to push up in the very top right-hand side on the color picker within Photoshop, you're going to find that that's the neon color. The top left-hand side is fully white, and anything that is this high on the page, you don't have a lot of room for contrast after that, and it can lead you to situations where you're kind of fighting against the canvas and the painting because everything is screaming, and we really don't want that to happen. That's pretty surprising that this white here that looks like one of the brightest things on the page isn't actually a pure white, and it's less saturated than that pink, wherever it was that we just grabbed, that was within the foreground. And as we start to grab some of these colors, even what we think is the brightest thing, yeah, see, that's almost neon yellow there in that little pool. But then we can see that we're starting to get closer to that middle safe square, just a little ways away from it. So there's definitely pops of super acidity within this piece, but the vast majority of the colors that we're going to see should reside, yeah, within that magic square. And so that's what's making this piece not feel like total acidic total acid on your eyes is that most of the color spaces within here are within the golden square, or you can turn around and use just all base neutral tones as well, and that can look really relaxing for the viewer. But yeah, that's where we're going to head, kind of an electric Dr. Seuss type thing that we're going to be creating. I still need my Wacom pin, but that's not going to stop me from showing you guys how to be able to set up your canvases. So within Photoshop, let's go, not open, let's go to File, New. And first thing we want to do is make sure in this new document section that pixels are selected. You can go to pixels, or you can do inches if you like as well. And I'm going to go 20 by 20 is a good safe resolution. Now the resolution is the really important part here. I want it to be 150 dpi, pixels per inch, not 300. 300 is what they use for print. 72 is going to have too little pixel information for these canvases. We want there to be a high density of pixels, and that is one of the keys to making sure that your artwork holds up and looks good. And one of the things that you might have been missing if you're just dropping into Photoshop. So setting the resolution to 150 and working at a canvas size that's 20 inches by 20 inches as a base is a good spot to begin. Now, the next important thing that I want to highlight for you guys within Photoshop is creating a middle gray background. So I'm going to create my first new layer here within my layers panel. That brings me to something else. Let's finish this thought though. So you want to make your background a middle gray when you're painting and building up your canvases. The reason for this is the pure white that it likes to start you off with will absolutely burn your eyeballs out after 10 years of doing this stuff. You'll be wearing glasses like I am. So starting with the middle gray is going to be a lot softer on your eyes. And as you start to apply color and block in your colors as well, if you're working on a white background, you tend to pick all of your color choices on the white that's behind it. So everything becomes that like neon color, and you're really trying to fight against this ultra bright room that you're looking into from the frame. So by setting this middle gray, it helps to allow you to be able to paint, not go into the super bright colors at first. You want to save those for the very, very end. Thomas Kinkade, one of the most unliked artists in American history for selling his paintings at fine art prices throughout shopping malls all throughout America. And mass producing these like comfy cottage core images. His job was to go in and just paint with the white. So he would have a whole studio of artists that he trained in his style, and then he would come in and just add the white brush marks at the very end. And I think that's a good lesson here to not move into white or the brights too quickly, rather working from our middle tone down into our shadows, into our highlights, but not our super bright saturated highlights at first. We'll see what we mean here. Okay, so we got something on color picking. The next one that I want to talk to you guys about is hitting B on the keyboard will bring up the brushes. Within the module 1 down at the bottom, you're going to see that there's some weird names, Takashi, something like that, and then another file that has like all these character symbols in it. Those are brush packs. You're going to want to download those. You're going to download them, unzip them, and then by hitting B on your keyboard inside of Photoshop, you go to this drop down right up here in the top left-hand side. So 3 icons over from the house next to the paintbrush, and you'll see this drop down. From there, you're going to see a little tiny wheel, a gear. Click on that gear, and then down at the bottom of that gear, you're going to see import brushes. And this is where you're going to be importing brushes into Photoshop, and those brushes will live there. So there is MB starter %pack, and you're going to get all these brushes inside of here. There's some really, really great ones inside of this thing, quite a few of them. And then there's also, on top of that, the Tatashin brushes, which are really, really useful as well. There's some great brushes in there. Now, one thing I want to warn you about these two brush packs. There are textured brushes inside of it. You can see that there's a splash and a water texture and a waterfall and a dirt splash. If you overuse these stamp brushes, it's going to become very obvious very quickly, and it's going to cheapen the overall look of your work. Same thing goes with the smudge tool within Photoshop. I see some students that get absolutely smudge crazy, and and that creates a bad look for the painting. You can think of it as adding too much of one ingredient. Like you try something that's, a soup and it's got way too much salt in it. If you use those effects brushes and overdo it with the effects brushes, you're adding way too much salt to a soup. And same thing goes for the smudge tool. You can take away all the character and all the interest out of a piece very easily with that smudge tool. It looks cool to see your painting get pulled, but the smudge tool has got a time and place, and we'll talk a lot about where that is throughout this semester. All right. So this is the basic starting canvas. I've got on top of my background layer, I've got a layer 1 that's gray. Go ahead and create a new layer. Got my reference images. I'm going to use my little lasso image here and just copy out my reference image, my original sketch. Now, you guys are going to be recreating these paintings within Photoshop. This means that for some of your works, you're going to need to modify and edit the original one. Maybe you want to redraw the body. This is an opportunity for you guys to go in and improve that original design in a big way. So before you just settle on this, there's going to be some things that change within this character's face that are going to make it look even stronger and make it work a lot better within the final illustration. I'm not just going to be satisfied with that first idea, that first sketch. I'm going to be being critical about it and seeing ways that I can improve it. Can I make the body look better? If I have got let's say I'm doing a different painting or a different illustration and it's a character running really fast. Well, I drew that character running really fast 2 years ago. I've had a lot of life drawing classes, but there's nothing wrong with using the internet as well, you guys, to help influence getting the anatomy right on the character, and not just looking at photos, but looking at illustrations. That's one of the most important things that you're going to hear me stress in this class is, photo references are fine, but you really, really, really need to be looking at illustration references for how the artist painted these things and used color and brushwork and layered up their paintings to be able to get to the final result. So way back in the day, they've been teaching art for a long time. If you were taking classes during the 1800s, 1700s even, you would go into a museum while you're a student, and you would sit in front of masters' works inside of that museum and then repaint those masters' works. And the idea was that you were doing studies. This was kind of their way of going to the internet and looking up reference images, and they would paint inside of the museum. In most places, you're still allowed to do this to this day. And the idea was that they were channeling the hand of those great artists and the lessons that they had learned previously. Now, when it comes to Photoshop, when you open up Photoshop, your Photoshop might look a little bit different than mine. Over the years, Photoshop has continued to become a bit of a bully with how much stuff it tries to show a starting designer. So they're going to have all this stuff pulled out on the right-hand side. You're going to see all this stuff. Collapse it. You want as much working space as you can possibly get within Adobe Photoshop, especially if you're working on like a laptop or anything like that. So what I like to do is close all that stuff on the right-hand side. I want to bring up my layers and pull those out so that they're freestanding and I can move them around. History isn't as important anymore because they allow you to actually control Z more than once. Way back when I started using Photoshop when I was in middle school years and years ago, um, you could only control Z once, so you had to go to history to undo things. Brush settings, we should definitely talk about those as well. So usually I like to leave the brush settings nice and collapsed up here also. And then I've got my navigator and my toolbar pulled out to the side as well so that I have got a clean palette. Oh, wait, there's one more thing. This guy, the navigator. This might be one of the most important things for you to be able to easily move around within Photoshop. There's another good reason for having the navigator open as well, is that this allows you to be able to get a thumbnail view of what your painting looks like. So now I can pull back very quickly and zoom in very quickly. If I'm zoomed in really tight, I can start to just move around this way by grabbing it, and it makes it a little bit easier for me to get around within Photoshop. I really, really love having the navigator to be able to always keep my eyes on that thumbnail view so I get an idea of what the colors are doing for the entire piece. This painting is already looking pretty rad. That's a good thing. I don't want that much on the side, so I started 20 by 20, but I'm going to pull it in like this to sort of a poster size. And I think that's going to work better. It keeps my character very centered on here. I like the negative space. There's a little bit of breathing space, but he's still pretty pushed up to the top. I think we might change that a little bit. The position of the tree, it's really cutting off the entire left-hand side of the composition over here. So I need to make sure that my background feels interesting. And it's got a little bit of depth behind there. But overall, for combining two old sketches together, I think that this is working pretty good, and we're in a pretty good spot to start the illustration and start the painting. What else was I going to tell you guys? Seems like there was something else. So we got our reference image for the colors. Oh yeah, brush setup. I need my Wacom first. Give me 1 second. I know it's around here somewhere. Got it. Okay. So when it comes to your brush setup within Photoshop, there's a couple things that I've learned over the years that I wish I'd known a lot sooner. Number one is turn the smoothing on. That's in the top gutter up here at the top. Turn that smoothing on. 25% should be enough. I don't care if you've got the hands of a surgeon. You're going to have trouble keeping and pulling a straight line within Photoshop. Something's going to wiggle, and to be able to get to really professional line work, you're going to need some smoothing. The next thing is this soft round brush, aka the airbrush, is not your friend. This is what Photoshop likes to default you to a lot of the times. Yes, this airbrush has got a time and space for itself, but it is not the primary brush that we're going to be using to paint in within this class. For sketching, you are going to want to use the hard round pressure size, or the hard round brush. So we've got our smoothing turned on. Let's look at those brush settings. If you do not see the brush settings, you can go to Window, drop down, and the fourth one down under 3D is going to be the brush settings. Open that up. When you look at the brush settings, you're going to, the ones that you're really interested in here are the shape dynamics, and you want to make sure that pin pressure is turned on, and it looks like this nice little wavy line here. Right? If that's not turned on, it's going to be a worm shape, and we want it to look more like a wave. Transfer can also be really useful as well, but we're going to leave that one off for now. That causes your brush, when you're holding it very lightly on the screen, to create a more transparent line, and then the harder you press down, you create a more opaque line. It's good for rendering, but for the sketch, I want to show you guys how I like to approach sketching within Adobe Photoshop. So within both my reference images, you'll notice that I've turned them down a great deal. They're at like 20%, 17% between the two of them. And Now I'm working on a fresh layer on top. So this is my sketch layer and starting to move into my drawing. I'm going to work in sort of a darkish blue. Yeah, so you guys can see what the heck it is that I'm doing. So I like to have my keyboard available. And the next thing that I'm going to do for the sketch layer is I'm going to go in and I'm going to drop my opacity down from 100% down to like 38%. Too often, I see students come in and they start sketching with the brush at like 100%, like this, and working their way through the stuff, and they get all these hairy, messy lines, and it really doesn't look all that great when you work that way. So we want to keep that brush nice and thin for these sketch layers. And we also want to make sure that we've got some opacity so that we can commit to the final line when we are ready. The opacity turned down to like 30%. Otherwise, if you keep it up at 100 and a big old brush, you're not going to have room for those ideas to breathe and to grow. So for the most part, I like the sketch on the outside here. We got some work to do with the character. So all that can mostly stay. We've got a background to figure out within this scene as well. So that's something that I'm asking you guys to do, is to go in and imagine how you can change and improve these paintings or these sketches as you're moving into the digital space. What are you going to challenge yourself with? Notice that I'm working really far away from my canvas. I'm not getting really up close at this stage and working super tight. I'm staying super loose and super far away as I'm starting to go through and work this character. Like the long chin there, the little bit of a hang down, make him look a little bit older. The skinny neck, I like those lines that are going on underneath here, this stuff. So I'm going to hold on to that with my sketch. The lack of eyebrows, I think, is pretty freaky and cool for this character. So we're going to leave those off. The lines around the mouth are looking and feeling good, like the cigarette smoking lines that are going on. There we go. So we've just made the bulbous thing on top of the character's head a little bit larger. And we want to make sure that they are knitting, right? So we had all those knitting reference images as well. So from here, let's get into sort of character drawing. So the way that I like to do my structural drawings on characters is I'm always thinking about where's the rib cage and drawing that in 3D. From here, we've got the soft belly section going into the ribs, from the ribs down to the buttocks. And then we've got the clavicle as well as the shoulders. So we want them to be knitting. And we really want to get some good negative space there with the knitting lines. Pinky out. There we go. That's all feeling pretty good to me. And again, they're going to be making themselves a. All right, so we've got our second line that we can do. I like the idea of throwing it right behind the character's chin since we have so much negative space there. There's the hand. Work it, and we're going to put it a little bit higher up and back. Hitting E on my keyboard to get to my eraser real quick. It's okay if your eraser is the fuzzy brush. That changes the chest. Push that shoulder forward, back. There we go. Starting to look pretty good. Got the hand bone, elbow. Right, there we go. And like I said, I want them to be cocooning themselves inside of this thing. So let's make, I think that's pretty cool. To have two vines kind of coming down here. There we go. We're going to have it move down into the shadow, and that's going to take up the entire left-hand side of the composition. So we've got a whole bunch of blanket to go through and make within this composition. But I think that's working pretty well. And again, by being able to sketch really lightly and loosely here at the start, and just going back over that previous drawing, I can figure out what it is I like about it, what I want to lose, what I want to keep, are the important moments within this. And then along the way, having a conversation with myself about how I might change this, how I can improve it now that I'm looking at it years later. Because the hardest part, whenever you're drawing, I've found over the years, is the concept. It's the thinking part of the design that slows most of us down. I really like that it's getting lighter over here on this side. There we go. And then this whole ridge, I'm completely in love with. I like it. This back part's looking strong. Like that, we've got sort of a lit area. And yeah, that's all feeling pretty strong to me. So I'm going to turn off those two initial sketches. And this is what we've got so far to be able to work with for this character. So now I'm in a good spot to be able to go in and with my under sketches as well, still turned on, start doing the final line work if I wanted to, or I can go in and I can start blocking the color in at this stage. And I think for this painting, based on that reference image, I'm gonna do this one without any line art. We've got a line art project that's coming up next within this course where we can really dive into line art. And for this one, I want to go through and talk to you guys about compositional flow, layering up, how to be able to approach the flat colors, and we're going to do this one without the line art. Get right into the painting, more painterly portions of this. So from this stage, we've got the rough sketch. I really don't have anything within the background yet. I probably need to start developing that out too. So I'm going to do the background on a different layer. I'm going to change my color over to red, just so that I know the difference between the two. And I'm going to open up this painting because a lot of times I like to work with a gutter over on the left-hand side for my reference images so that I can see them at all times. But for this one, we're working nice and loose. So I want the background to help draw viewers into this composition. Let me create a layer on top so we can kind of see what's happening here. So right now, the line work in this is a hard pull, right? So this section over here needs to not have any interest to it. What I want to be interesting is this character. However, I've also got a whole bunch of visual interest that's going on in here with contrast. I've got another light source that's coming out from here that's trying to grab the viewer's attention. And so we've got three different things that are fighting against each other within this composition. So I've got to figure out a way to be able to use something called the 70-30 rule, where we're making the viewers focus on 30% of the painting, and the other 70% is there to push the viewer's eyes into what it is I want them to look at. I hope that that makes sense. So I'm already starting to do that a little bit with these two lines. I've got a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a line that's pointing down, another line that's pointing over from the character's hat as well. That's bringing us in here. This line is starting to direct us up. this entire kind of shape that's part of the tree is going to be directing the viewer's attention up. This other line, this stuff is going to be all directing us to what's going on within the character's hands. So this is what you guys as designers, illustrators, painters, animators have got to start developing, is how it is that you're pulling the viewer's attention to the spot that you actually want them to look at and see. Now, I don't want this over here on the right-hand side to be dead space. That's not what we want, all right? We still want it to be interesting. I still want it to help with the overall composition, but it's not the focus. So now that I've got my main points and my main flow, as I start to think about the background design here, right-clicking on the edge of one of your, where the eyeball is at in the gray space, will allow you to be able to change the color of that layer, and that can be useful. One of the other things that I always do as well is by hitting V on my keyboard, I can right-click, and by right-clicking, that allows me to be able to jump my layers very, very quick. So I can get over to layer 4, I can get back up to layer 6, and when I've got hundreds of layers, this is how I like to find my way around very, very quickly, is by hitting V when I'm painting. So I hope that is a helpful tip for you guys. Okay, so with my electric forest image opened up, let's see how we can, some of the things that I like in the electric forest image. Make sure that I'm being visual about this. Duplicate. Layer. Okay. So some spots that I think that are strong here. I really like this branch. I like the atmospheric perspective, the way that things are becoming more gray as it moves further away. I really was attracted to these puddles on the ground. I thought that those were really, really cool. So I want to try to include some of those puddles within my final scene. The trees are pretty straight up. There's not too much interest that's really going on with most of these trees. They're pretty safe. They're not as gangly and gnarly as the one that we have within the main composition. So it's creating strong verticals within the shot to be able to lead the viewer's eye down, right? Backwards and forwards through the scene into those puddles, which is what makes it a strong composition. That tree's got some interest to it, but let's see what kind of takeaways we can bring into this painting. So they've got the puddles, they've got a bunch of foliage. Let's go ahead and leave that stuff all down. And then on this side, we're going to create the foliage. All right, so we got some trees that we need to drop within the background here. Let's again do sort of a mid-ground thing for the foliage. And I like that of having the trees. There it is, got it. Be a little bit less interesting in the background. So this one's pretty cool with the sort of viney trees that are going on. Give that one its time in the light. That allowed me to be able to add some more little lines and string that this character is painting with. So some more of those vines hanging down. I like the little vertical brush strokes that are coming off, or sorry, the branches that are vertical that are coming off the trees within the background. That's working for me. It's interesting. And I keep on glancing over at the reference image. So behind here, it becomes sort of visual noise. I think that's okay. I like the way that within the painting on the left-hand side, it becomes quite a bit less. So there's my tree hiding behind there. Let's complete this branch. And where it is that it's going. So I like the idea of making this Yeah, here we go. We'll do another. So what I want to do is create a halo effect around this character um, for the light from the background. And they're going to be, you can see the reference image that the trees are backlit. So we're not seeing the front of the tree from the viewer's perspective. Instead, we're seeing the light coming from behind. And I think that that'll work fairly well within this composition. So let's pillage that tree. Let's give it some wind-torn marks here. There we go. And we'll give it foliage right here. That works well. Another branch. And I'm using this branch to sort of direct the viewer's eye down to where I want them to look. That's feeling better. So now we're starting to create that V shape coming in on the character, just looking good. And let's go back with one more tree, maybe two more, way off in the distance here. Let that one bleed into the background. There we go. So I think we're in a pretty good spot now with our background to start blocking this thing in. Yeah. So we've got a lot more details held within the sketch for where the shadows are going to happen. We're going to save those for a little bit later. There's I would recommend adding more to your sketches, but I think that this is a good soft overview of how to be able to take your old sketch to update it into an illustration that's telling a story, so it's no longer just an interesting study of a tree, but instead we're starting to tell this interesting story of this guy who is knitting his own cocoon and working in the forest mysteriously. I think there's a cool story that's being told there. Module one, cocoon, forest. There you go. So I've got my two sketches, and now to be able to start blocking this thing in, the way that I like to work is from as far back as I possibly can at first, and then working my way forward towards the foreground. So as far back as I can see within this reference image, I've hit I on the keyboard to be able to get my color picker. I can see that we've got this purple color. Let me double check. So it's still sort of a pretty bright tone here. I might end up turning this down, but for now, let's push forward with it. So I'm gonna go on top of my gray area, my gray color. I'm at 30% on the hard brush. Let's go up to 50%. Now let's go to 100 for this first backing color. And we're just gonna start making some choices. I think that'll look cool if the character's got kind of a pasty white face on him. So this is all foliage down here, so we're not going to see any of that result really. Using my brackets just down below the backspace on the keyboard to be able to change my brush size while I'm painting. There we go. So now we've committed to our first color. Next thing that I'm going to do, this purple was pulled from the edges. I'm going to go over here and let's start grabbing the next purple as we start to get towards that heat point in the center within the painting. So the next purple is a little bit lighter. Now I'm going to actually change my brush. And some of the brushes that I really like to use in here, hard round can work well. One of these is called Pastel. Where's it at? Rough paint. No, these guys. Line Art Legendary. It's a pretty awesome brush. So I'm going to turn that down from 100% down to 30%. And remember, I'm going to have my darker trees going over the top of this thing, and this is just moving out from where the bright space is going to be. So I could do this on a new layer, but this is the furthest background color within my shot. And I'm just going to start doing some different size and different pressures for the painting along the edges. Getting those verticals in there because we're in a forest, the trees grow up. Now we've got some other colors to work with within this background. Again, I'm working from as far back as I possibly can. My brush is turned down to 30%, so I'm not committing to the full drawing yet. And now I've started broad, and now I'm going to go back in with just some other tighter brushwork here and there. I don't know how much this stuff's going to make it into the final illustration, but I'm infusing some energy, some energetic strokes to these early sections, and usually this pays off pretty well. Cool. All righty. So from there, let's not get into that bright area yet. The next thing that I want to do is start working into some of these teals. I think these teals are really nice that they have going on within this background. So what is the edge teal that we're seeing over here? That's sort of a good middle teal color. There we go. Perfect. I'm always looking for my middle tone. Again, trying to work really broad, big at first. I'm thinking, not forgetting about the halo that I want to create around the character's head. So try and pull down some of those tones. I haven't painted any of the trees in yet. Start doing that here in a bit. There we go. Now we're starting to get something that's going. This is starting to work pretty well. We're going to move a little bit more forward. We're starting to get into this sort of middle saturation here that I think is nice, but we need that bright color. All right. See how it sort of dissipates and the shaped lines for it get smaller. So we're moving over like that. Now we've got our super bright color. It is time. It's going to go right behind the character here. So it dissipates pretty quickly. Give a hint, some of those tones over here. This is still me just roughing in different portions. And I'm pulling each one of these colors from the background. That's looking good to me. And now we've got this super ultra saturated color up at the very top. I don't want to forget about that. Got kind of a, like I said, atmospheric perspective that's existing within this painting or this illustration. Dissipating it as we get over into the edges. Notice that I'm being really cautious about the shapes that I'm making with my brushes. There's a variety, there's a rhythm to the line marks that I'm making. I'm starting off broad and then working my way into smaller strokes. So now we're finally at a good spot to go in and start adding some of those background trees. So I'm going to create my first new layer and let's make the background trees, oops, 100%. This one's a super background tree as well. Sounds funny to say, super background tree. That'll help break those portions up. Here's another super background tree. All right, what do we have here? That guy is dark. All right, that's my first round of trees. Let's go a little bit forward. We're still not to the blacks yet. Save the blacks for the foreground on this and create a little bit more division. All right, got some space to paint in some color on this tree. What was it? Oh yeah. Like those vertical lines on them. That looks cool. We've got that one purple. This one is getting quite a bit darker. Notice that each one of these trees has got a gradient running through them. Staying really loose here at this stage. There we go. Let's get this tree moving across. Quite a bit darker. All right, so that's starting to look pretty cool. Nice. All right. And I think that is going to be enough for this evening. That'll get you through the background. Start working on Thursday on the foreground. But yeah, that's a good start. Still plenty of other little details and tweaks to do to this background so far. Let's turn off those two sketch layers. And yeah, pretty good color space that we were able to pull, but then manipulate and make our own from that reference image over on the left-hand side. So I hope that was useful for you guys to how to start building up and constructing a deep, dense forest and some unusual color schemes within your paintings. I would never think to make something like to use color in this kind of way. But yeah, thanks for checking this out. And if you've got any questions, please just let me know.